Good evening. Well, good afternoon. How's everybody doing? Great to be learning with you on a Friday. Erev Shabbos Yom Shishi. How's everybody doing? Let's light up the darkness. Who's in the house? Yehud in South Carolina, Renee in Indiana, Paul in the Great Northwest, Gordo in Scotland, Nancy in North Carolina, Lucy in Minnesota, Lorraine in Texas, Shandora in the Bronx, Sharon in New Jersey, Joe in the Inland Empire, and Chaim in Florida. Welcome, everybody. Let's get to it. Our daf today is page 53 here in Tractate Avoda Zara, the 27th volume of the Talmud. Continuing our journey through chapter 4. Today opening Mishna number 4. And we should, God willing, get through Mishna 5 and open Mishna 6 today. Okay, we start with Mishna number 4 toward the bottom of page 52b. Mishnah 4. A Gentile can revoke the status of his object of idolatry and the status, the idolatrous status, of the idol of another Gentile. But a Jew cannot revoke the status of the object of idolatry of a Gentile. One who revokes the status of an object of idolatry thereby revokes the status of its accessories. But if he revokes the status, the idolatrous status of its accessories, the accessories alone would be rendered permitted for use by a Jew because they're no longer in the realm of idolatry. But the object of idolatry itself would remain prohibited, right? And so we've already covered this particular mission a bunch of times because we needed this principle in other discussions that an idolater can revoke the status of his idol and say, I'm not worshiping that anymore. It's not an idolatrous statue anymore. Not only about one that he worships, but even the idol of some other idolater. Presumably has to have the right to do it, not a stolen idol, not one declared that it's no longer an idol even though it belongs to somebody else. But if he has this ability to turn it from an object of idolatry into something mundane, an idolater can do that. Why is it that a Jew can't say, hey, this idol, which, let's say it's ownerless, it was abandoned, under circumstances, as we'll discuss today, where we have no reason to believe the idolaters removed it from idolatry, but a Jew has now found it. It's ownerless. It can't be returned to its owner because they don't exist. They can't be found, etc. Why is it that the Jew can't say, okay, I'm not going to use this for idolatry. I'm just going to melt it down and use it to, fabricate a hammer? Why can't a Jew do that? That was a decree of the rabbis, of the sages, because before he revokes it, if he picks it up, now he has taken benefit from an object of idolatry, and to prevent and to protect Jews from coming to commit that prohibition, to violate that prohibition, to commit that sin, the sages said a Jew cannot, right, by rabbinic decree, a Jew cannot remove an idol from the realm of idolatry. Only the idolaters can do that. Now let's get into some nuances and implications of this law. That's the Mishnah. Now the Gemara. Rebbe, right? Rebbe is our nickname for Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, the redactor of the Mishnah. Rebbe taught Rabbi Shimon, the son of Rebbe, right? His son, the following version of this Mishnah. A Gentile can revoke the status of his object of idolatry and the status of the idol of another Gentile. Rabbi Shimon said to him, right, to his father, my teacher, in your youth, meaning when you were younger, you taught us a different version of the Mishnah. A Gentile can revoke the status of his object of idolatry and the status of the object of idolatry of a Jew. So the Gemara asks, can the status of a Jew's idol be revoked? But isn't it written, Deuteronomy 27:15, and shall set it up in a hidden place, right? Which doesn't seem to address this, but the sages interpreted that it does. From which the sages derived that a Jew's idol requires interment, right? If a Jew owns an idol, right, he commits the sin of idolatry, right? So a Jew became an idolater, God forbid. He has an idol. He worshipped it. He committed this grave sin. Okay, maybe he passes away, he leaves, or even he repents and he regrets that he committed idolatry. He's not going to do it again. What do we do with his object of idolatry? A Jew cannot revoke its status. To render that object, let's say it was made out of silver, and now he regrets that he committed idolatry, and he wants to revoke it from the world of idolatry. He can't. Jews can't revoke an idol from the world of idolatry. So since it belonged to the Jew, what do we do with it? We bury it. That's something we learned yesterday. It has to be buried, sequestered, so it can never be used again. But it can't be reclaimed and recycled and brought back into the mundane world to be used for something else. But isn't it written, and shall set it up in a hidden place, from which the sages derived that a Jew's idol requires interment? Rabbi Hillel, the son of Rabbi Volas, said, no, this law is necessary in a case where the Gentile has partnership in the idol, and therefore it is possible to say that its status can be revoked, right? You might have thought that if a Jew and an idolater were partners in the ownership of an idol, therefore the idolater could revoke its status of idolatry, and then that object would become permitted again for other Jews, to use for something else other than idolatry, obviously. You might have thought that, but since the Jew has co-ownership in it, we're not going to be able to recycle at least the part that is owned by the Jew. And if it was, they didn't like split it in half, the Jew owned part of it, and we're not going to be able to revoke that part of its status. So the Gemara asks, what did Rebbe hold in his youth, and what did he hold in his old age? Do these contradict each other? He just taught it differently? Was he saying the same thing with different words, or were they different teachings? So the Gemara answers, in his youth, he held that the Jew worships the idol based on the intention of the Gentile. What does this mean? He held in his youth that were it not for the Gentiles' influence, the Jew would not have believed in the idol or accepted it as a deity. Where did he get this idea? From the idolater. Therefore, when the Gentile, the idolater, revokes its status, the foundation of the Jew's belief in it is eliminated, and its status as an object of idolatry is revoked without requiring the Jew to revoke it himself. The Jew can't revoke it, but the idolater could, and since they co-owned it, then would take that object out of the realm of idolatry. That's what Rebbe said in his youth. But later, in his old age, Rebbe held that the Jew worships the idol based on his own intentions. Therefore, when the Gentile revokes the status of the object of idol worship, he revokes the status of only his own share. But the status of the share of the Jew is not revoked, so that object can never be, can never provide a benefit. We can never benefit from it. Jews can never benefit from it. So the only thing for us to do with it, if we have to do something with it, is bury it. There are those who teach that Rabbi Hillel's statement with regard to the latter clause of the Mishna, where it says a Jew cannot revoke the status of the object of idolatry of a Gentile. So the Gemara asks, well, isn't that obvious? Said Rabbi Hillel, the son of Rabbi Volas, no, this law is necessary. Right? It's not so obvious. Why is it necessary? In a case where the Gentile had partnership in the idol. And this teaches us that it is only a Jew who cannot revoke the status of a Gentile's object of idolatry, but a Gentile can revoke the status of his own object of idolatry. There are those who teach Rabbi Hillel's statement with regard to a Baraisa. Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh says the status of a Jew's object of idol worship can never be revoked. What is the reason for the additional emphasis of the term never? And Rabbi Hillel, the son of Rabbi Volas, says the emphasis is necessary only for a case where the Gentile has partnership in the idol, and it teaches us that the Jew worships the idol based on his own intentions. And therefore, although the Gentile revokes the status of his share, the Jew's share remains forbidden, as we said before. And that concludes our discussion of Mishnah number 4. A quick one. We are on page 53a, and now we open Mishnah number 5 here in chapter 4. How does a Gentile revoke the status of an object of idol worship? Right? What does it mean he revokes its status as an object of idol worship? He says, I hereby revoke its status. Is that enough? What if he didn't say the words? What if he took an action? What kind of action is necessary? Let's read. If he cut off the tip of its ear, or the tip of its nose, or its fingertip, or if he crushed it, even though he did not remove any part of it, in all these cases, he thereby revoked its status as an object of idol worship. Right? So if you imagine that the idol is made out of metal, and so if the idolater, takes a hammer and hammers in the face, he didn't remove material from it, but he literally defaced it. And that would show that he no longer worships it. He's obviously not in awe of it. He hammered in its face. So he would have demonstrated that he had revoked its status as an idol. He has thereby removed it from the realm of idolatry. He has thereby revoked its status as an object of idol worship. If he spat before the idol, if he urinated before it, if he dragged it on the ground, or he threw excrement at it, the status of this idol is not revoked, as this is only a temporary display of scorn, and afterward, the idolater might continue to worship the idol. He might have been angry that he didn't get what he wanted, and then later, come back and worship it again. He hasn't removed the idol from the realm of idolatry. If the Gentiles sold it or mortgaged it, Rebbe says he thereby revoked its status. And the rabbis, the majority who overrule Rebbe, say that he did not revoke its status. That's Mishnah 5. Now the Gemara. The Mishnah teaches that if the Gentile crushed the idol without removing any part of it, the status of the idol is revoked. And the Gemara asks, in a case where he did not remove any part of it, by what action did he revoke its status? And Rav Zara said the Mishnah is referring to a case where he crushed its face with a hammer, destroying its form, even though none of its stone was removed. I don't quite understand. None of its stone was removed? I think if you take a hammer to an idol made of stone and you hammer in its face, it would have to be a very soft kind of stone for the stone not to, chip and break and fall off. That's why I said my example was with a metal idol. That makes sense to me. And it's really only in the elucidation that it says stone. So I prefer to believe that is metal. That makes a lot more sense to me. The Mishnah teaches if he spat before the idol or he urinated before it, the status of the idol is not revoked, as this is only a temporary display of scorn. So the Gemara asks, from where are these matters derived? Chizkiah says this is derived from a verse. As the verse states, and it shall come to pass that when he shall be hungry, he shall fret and curse his king and his God and turn his face upward. Isaiah 8:21. And it is written after this verse, and he shall look to the earth and behold distress and darkness, the gloom of anguish and outspread thick darkness. Isaiah 8:22. This indicates that even though he cursed his king and his idolatrous God, and he turned his face upward to God, the one God of the universe, nevertheless, he subsequently looks to the earth and beholds distress and darkness, since he returns to his old idolatry. Right? When things went bad for him, maybe he opened himself up to recognizing God, the real God of the world. But this is not a person who has really repented, and become a Noahide, right? This is a person who's temporarily down and will resume his idolatrous ways. The Mishnah, he might make a teshuvah, he might make an atonement, but we have no evidence that that's already happened. So we would not remove his idol from the realm of idolatry based only on his angry outburst. Okay, new subject. The Mishnah, this Mishnah number 5, teaches if the Gentile sold it or mortgaged it. So let's just think about that for a second. The idolater owns an idol. He sells it. Has he revoked his idolatrous practice? Has he really removed it from the realm of idolatry? Why should we think that? Maybe he just needs money and he's going to sell the idol to another idolater. Why would that remove the idol from the realm of idolatry? But Rebbe says he has revoked its status. The rabbis say he did not. The Gemara cites a dispute between that which Zari says, that Rabbi Yochanan says, and that which Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba says that Rav says. One of them says, the dispute between Rebbe and the rabbis applies only when the Gentile sold his idol to a Gentile smith. But when he sold it to a Jewish smith, everyone agrees that by selling the idol, the Gentile revoked its status, as he knows that the Jewish smith will certainly melt it down. And the other one says the dispute applies to the case where he sold the idol to a Jewish smith. A dilemma was raised before the sages. According to the second opinion, does the dispute apply only to the case where he sold the idol to a Jewish smith? But if he sold it to a Gentile smith, everyone agrees that he did not revoke its status by selling it? Or perhaps both in this case and in that case there is a dispute. So the Gemara says, come in here, a baraisa. As Rebbe said, my statement that by selling the idol to the Gentile revokes its status appears correct in a case where he sold it for the purpose of destruction. And the statement of my colleagues that the status is not revoked appears correct in a case where he sold it for the purpose of worship. Right? So these are the simple cases. If the Gentile sold his idol in a situation where he knows it's going to be melted down, clearly he has revoked its status as an idol. He has removed it from the realm of idolatry. If he's selling it to another idolater who's going to worship it, clearly he has not removed it from the realm of idolatry. So when should we have a question? Where it's not so obvious what the fate of this idol is going to be that he is selling. Right? If he's selling it to a smith, it's pretty obvious that it's probably going to get melted down. But if he's selling it, let's say to a Gentile that we don't know if he's an idolater or not, or maybe just to a merchant who's going to buy and sell it, so we don't know where it's going to end up, whether with a smith or with an idolater, how should we know? In that situation, I would think we're going to rule stringently, right? And say, we can't remove it, because how would we know where it's going to end up? How does he know where it's going to end up? Maybe Rebbe would say, well, since it might end up with a smith, it must be that the Gentile is willing, that the idolater is willing to give up his idol in a situation where it could end up being melted, even though he doesn't know that for sure. So he is revoking its status. Whereas the rabbis would say, let's be stringent and say, well, he doesn't know, so he doesn't know. So we can't say that it's been removed. So we want to be stringent and make sure that no Jew comes near this idol, which is possibly still an idol, so remains prohibited for us. But let's see how the analysis goes. So the Gemara explains the baraisa. What is the meaning of selling the idol for destruction, and what is the meaning of selling it for worship? If we say that selling it for destruction means literally that he knew that it was being bought for the purpose of destruction, and that selling it for worship means literally that it was bought for the purpose of worship, this is difficult. What is the reasoning of the one who says that the Gentile revoked the idol's status even though he knew that the buyer intended to worship it? And what will be the reasoning of one who says that he did not revoke its status even though he knew that the buyer intended to destroy it? Right? We can't be talking about those obvious cases. So rather, is it not referring to a case where the buyer's intentions were not known with certainty? And accordingly, selling the idol for destruction means selling it to one who will presumably destroy it in the future. And who is that buyer? Well, this is referring to a Jewish smith. Similarly, selling the idol for worship means selling it to one who will presumably worship it in the future. And who is that buyer? This is referring to a Gentile smith. Since Rebbe states that his opinion appears correct in the case of a Jewish smith, and the opinion of his colleagues appears correct in the case of a Gentile smith, one may conclude from the baraisa that there is a dispute both in this case and in that case. But the Gemara rejects this whole analysis. No. This is what the baraisa is saying. Rebbe said, my statement that the idol's status is revoked appears to my colleagues correct in a case where he sold it for the purpose of destruction. And who is it that buys the idol with the intent of destroying it? This is referring to a Jewish smith. This is because even my colleagues disagree with me only in the case where he sold it for the purpose of worship. But when he sold it to a Jewish smith for the purpose of destruction, they concede to my opinion that the idolater in selling it has revoked its status as an idol. But the Gemara raises an objection from a baraisa with regard to one who buys broken vessels made from gold or silver from the Gentiles, and he finds among them an object of idolatry. If he pulled the object of idol worship, thereby performing an act of acquisition before he gave the money to the Gentile, he may return the object of idolatry to the Gentile. But if he pulled it after he gave the money to the Gentile, he may not return it. And since the idol's status was not revoked, he must take it and cast it into the Dead Sea, because we can never benefit from an object of idolatry, and a Jew may not revoke its status once it's in his possession, once it's his. So since this is what the sages are trying to protect us from, exactly this situation. He bought a bunch of, let's say, gold coins. Turns out that one of them is an object of idolatry. He's already acquired them, right? It's his. So he can't now, because he's a Jew who owns an object of idolatry, he can't revoke its status as an object of idolatry. He can't benefit from it, so he can't sell it. He can't give it back. He can't revoke its status. What's he going to do? Throw it in the Dead Sea to make sure that no other Jew ever comes across it and ends up benefiting from it in a prohibited manner, and especially so he himself won't be in that situation. Now, the Gemara explains how this objection works in the discussion we were just having between Rebbe and the majority. Granted, if you say that in the case of a Gentile who sells an object of idol worship to a Jewish smith, there is a dispute between Rebbe and the rabbis, the Baraisa is not difficult. In accordance with whose opinion is this Baraisa? It is in accordance with the opinion of the rabbis, who hold that when a Gentile sells an idol to a Jewish smith, he does not thereby revoke its status. But if you say that the dispute between Rebbe and the rabbis applies only when the idol is sold to a Gentile smith, but in the case of a Jewish smith, everyone agrees that the Gentile revoked the idol's status, then in accordance with whose opinion is this Baraisa? And the Gemara answers, that's a different case. It is different there, as the Gentile sold the metal with the understanding that he was selling broken vessels. And he did not sell the metal with the understanding that he was selling an object of idolatry. He therefore had no intention of revoking its status because he didn't know that he was selling an idol. He just was selling a bunch of fragments, and it turned out that included among them was an object of idolatry, but he didn't know that, or he wasn't selling it with that understanding. The sages taught, if a Gentile borrowed money against an object of idolatry, okay, so he owns an idol, he's putting it up for collateral against money that he's borrowing, or with regard to another case where a rock slide fell on it, or a case where robbers stole it, or a case where the owners abandoned it and went overseas, the following law applies. So what are we talking about? We're talking about a situation where it's not clear how the idolater came to part ways, or what his intention was when he parted ways with his idol. If he sells it, to a Jewish smith or a Gentile smith, okay, we get it. He's selling it for money. If he simply declares, I'm no longer an idolater, or this statue is no longer the object of my idolatry, okay, it's clear what he's doing and why he's doing it. But what about these situations where maybe the idol was taken from him against his will, but not totally? So has he revoked its status or not? Let's analyze. 53b. In any of these cases, if the owners will return in the future, as was the case in the war of Joshua when he conquered the land of Israel, then the status of the object of idolatry is not revoked, right? So one situation is the idolaters have, let's say, a temple of idolatry in their village, and then Joshua leads the war of conquest into the promised land, and these guys run away, right? They don't stand and fight and get defeated. Rather, they run away. So do we say that they abandoned their idols, and therefore those idols have been removed from the realm of idolatry by owners who didn't care enough to take their idols with them? Or do we say that these guys thought they'd come back, and so they're not even abandoning it, they're just, leaving it behind temporarily, they're going to come back and continue worshiping it later, or, put it on a wagon and cart it off later. But we have no basis to say that they revoked the status of those idols. The Gemara comments, and it is necessary for the Baraisa to state it in all these different cases, right? What were the ones we said? Borrowed, and you put it up as collateral, right? So let's say he didn't pay the money, so he loses the item as collateral. That's not a sale. He knew when he put it up as collateral that if he didn't pay back the money, it would be taken from him. But he thinks that if I do pay back the money, I'll get it back, right? Or a rock slide fell on it. Okay, well, he thinks he could, dig it up, lift off the rocks. Or a case where robbers stole it. Now, has he despaired of ever recovering it? Is that going to make a difference? Or is he thinking, the robbers took it, I hope I get it back? Or a case where the owners abandoned it and went overseas, as we're talking about when they left, in that kind of a war. So let's keep reading, right? And it was necessary for the Baraisa to state all these cases, as had the Baraisa taught only the case where the Gentile borrowed money against the object of idolatry. One could say that in that case, the Gentile did not revoke its status because he didn't sell it. And he did not indicate that he intended to relinquish it. But in the case of a rock slide, since he did not clear the rocks, say that he revoked the status of the object of idolatry. It is therefore necessary to teach this case as well. And had the Baraisa taught only the case where a rock slide fell on the idol, one would say that in that case its status is not revoked because the owner thinks to himself, the idol lies under the rocks safely. Whenever I want it, I shall take it. And he feels no need to clear the rock slide immediately. The fact that he doesn't clear the rock slide immediately doesn't mean he's not going to do it later. But in the case where robbers stole it, since he's not searching after it, this indicates that he revoked its status. It is therefore necessary to teach this case as well. And had the Baraisa taught only the case where the robbers stole the idol, one would say that in that case its status is not revoked because the owner thinks to himself, if a Gentile stole it, he will worship it. If a Jew took it, since it is of great monetary value, he will sell it to a Gentile, and the buyer will worship it. There is therefore no indication that the Gentile intends to revoke its status. But in the case where the owners abandoned the idol and went overseas, since they did not take it with them, this indicates that they revoked its status. It is therefore necessary to teach this case as well. The Baraisa states, if the owners will return in the future, as was the case in the war of Joshua when he conquered Eretz Yisrael, then the status of the object of idolatry is not revoked. And the Gemara asks, is it so that after the war of Joshua, the Gentiles returned home? They were defeated and killed. They did not return home. And the Gemara explains, this is what the Baraisa is saying. If the owners will return in the future, the idol has the same status as did the idols of the Gentiles who were killed in the war of Joshua, who intended to return and did not revoke the status of their idols, and therefore its status is not revoked. They ended up getting killed, but they didn't know they were gonna get killed. So, when they initially abandoned it to go to the battlefield, they were not revoking the status of their idols. We're saying the same thing about one who runs off thinking he'll come back. The Gemara asks, why should I associate this law with the war of Joshua? And the Gemara answers, it teaches us a matter in passing, that the laws of idol worship may be derived from the war of Joshua, as may be illustrated by that which Rav Yehuda says that Rav says. In the case of a Jew who set a brick upright in order to bow to it, but he did not actually bow to it, and a Gentile then came and bowed to it, the Gentile rendered it prohibited, even though it was not his brick. Very interesting, right? The Jew set up the brick in a situation where he maybe was going to commit the sin of idolatry, but he didn't. But then the idolater came and bowed to it. So he renders that brick prohibited, even though it's not his brick. The Gemara explains, from where do we derive that he rendered the brick prohibited? Rabbi Lazar says this law is like the law that applied at the outset of the Jewish people's conquest of Eretz Yisrael, when the Torah commanded them to destroy any trees that were used as part of idolatrous rites. Asherah, right? Plural of Asherah. As the merciful one states, and you shall break down their altars and you shall burn their Asherim with fire. Deuteronomy 12:3. Now, Eretz Yisrael is the inheritance of the Jewish people from their ancestors, and a person does not render forbidden an item that is not his. If so, how could the Gentiles render the trees forbidden as the land was not theirs? They had colonized it. If the trees were forbidden because some of them might have been those trees that were worshipped initially before God gave the land to Abraham, it would not have been necessary to destroy them. Rather, the Jews could have forced the Gentiles to revoke their status, and since the Asherim were objects of the Gentiles' idol worship, a mere revocation would be sufficient to render them permitted. So rather, since the Jewish people worshiped the golden calf, they revealed their intentions and indicated that they were amenable to idol worship. Tragic incident. And when the Gentiles came and engaged in idol worship, they were in effect carrying out their agency on behalf of the Jewish people. And the Asherim were therefore considered objects of Jews' idol worship, whose status cannot be revoked. And so too in the case of a Jew who set a brick upright in order to bow to it, even though he hasn't yet bowed to it, he thereby revealed his intentions and indicated that he is amenable to idol worship. And when a Gentile came and worshipped it, he was carrying out the agency on behalf of the Jew. There's a lot of assumptions here, legal assumptions, but we're really tracking through sort of by way of these historical examples, kind of like backfitting it into a legal analysis. Does it really fit, what the Jews were doing in the wilderness, having come out of Egypt, and the golden calf, that somehow they grant agency to the Canaanites who were occupying the land while the Jews were enslaved in Egypt? That somehow because the Jews at a certain point committed idolatry, that the Canaanites who were committing idolatry in the Holy Land could be said to be acting as an agent of the Jewish people? There's a lot of assumptions there that could easily fall apart and not withstand scrutiny. But really we're saying, if we make that assumption, then what result? We don't actually make that assumption. It's just for the purposes of this legal analysis. So let's keep reading. The Gemara challenges this. But perhaps it is only with regard to the golden calf that the Jewish people were amenable to worshiping it, but not with regard to other types of idolatry. And the Gemara counters this by saying the verse states with regard to the golden calf, and they said, "These are your gods, O Israel." That's Exodus 32:4 in the plural. And this teaches that they desired many gods, and they did not desire to worship only the golden calf. And the Gemara say that whatever Asherim were worshipped by the Gentiles simultaneously with the Jewish people's worship of the golden calf, those should be prohibited because at that time they acted as agents of the Jewish people. But any Asherah that was worshipped from that point forward, after the Jewish people repented and no longer engaged in idolatry, those should be permitted because you can't render something that is not yours and is attached to the ground prohibited. That's why it would remain permitted. And the Gemara answers, who can prove when each Asherah was worshipped? Since it is impossible to determine which Asherim were worshipped at the time of the golden calf and which after, they are all forbidden, right? Which is obviously the general law that the Torah and Moses taught to Joshua, that when you go into the land, any tree that you determine was worshipped by the Canaanites, by the Gentiles who were there, you have to tear down and destroy those trees. And that concludes our discussion of Mishnah number 5. Now we open Mishnah 6. With regard to an object of idolatry, an object of idol worship that was abandoned by its worshipers. If it was abandoned in peacetime, it is permitted, right? Because they removed it from the realm of idolatry when they abandoned it, as it was evidently abandoned by choice. And this constitutes an implicit revocation of its status as an object of idol worship. But if it was abandoned in wartime, it is prohibited for Jews to benefit from it, as it was not abandoned by choice. They intend to come back. They never consciously, purposely abandon or revoke the status of those idols. They just had to flee because it was wartime. With regard to the stone platforms of kings upon which idols are placed in honor of the kings, these are permitted due to the fact that the idol is placed on these platforms only at the time that the kings pass by. That's Mishnah 6. Now the Gemara. Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba says that Rav says the temple of Nimrod, i.e. the remnants of the Tower of Babel, the Tower of Babel, This is considered a place of idol worship, whose worshippers abandoned it in peacetime, and it is therefore permitted. And this is despite the fact that when the merciful one scattered the builders of the tower, the situation resembled wartime, as they were compelled to leave. Nevertheless, if they had desired to return, they could have returned. Since they did not return, they evidently chose to abandon the place of idol worship, and they thereby revoked its status. And that would mean that the stones and metal that were used to build that temple of idolatry now could be repurposed for mundane purposes, building materials, etc. We wouldn't use it in the holy temple. We wouldn't use it for sacred purposes, but Jews could benefit from those building materials, obviously, if it's not in any way related to idolatry. Whereas, if they fled during wartime, that would mean they didn't remove that statue or that temple of idolatry from the realm of idolatry, and then Jews could not use those stones or iron beams or anything like that for our own building projects. The Mishna teaches, with regard to the stone platforms of kings, these are permitted due to the fact that the idol is placed on these platforms only at the time that the kings pass by. It's not a permanent platform, permanent pedestal for the idol. And the Gemara asks, but should the platforms be permitted because idols are placed on them at the time that kings pass by? Isn't that enough? Isn't it, regular enough that when kings pass by, these platforms act as pedestals for idols? Shouldn't that render those pedestals and platforms prohibited since they are accessories to idolatry, even if it's in irregular intervals? Rabbi Bar Chana said that Rabbi Yochanan said, this is what the Mishna is saying. The platforms are permitted because the idol is placed on them at the time that the kings pass by, and sometimes the kings abandon this path where the platform has been placed and choose to walk on a different path. Since the kings do not impart any importance to the platforms, they are not considered accessories of idol worship. They're just, whatever is around so that they could lift up those idols when the kings come by. But the platforms themselves are not considered, that their purpose is to hold up idols. They could hold up other things too. When Ula came, I'm almost done. Questions or comments, please get them in now. And Nina is not available to pass me questions, so I will be scanning the comments for your comments and questions. I'm just confirming that it is so exactly. Very good. Okay. So when Ula came from Eretz Yisrael to Babel, he sat on a damaged. When Ula came from Eretz Yisrael to Babel, he sat on a damaged platform of idol worship. A damaged platform of idol worship. So he sat on it. Right? If he's sitting on it, he's benefiting from it. Somebody might ask him, well, wait a minute, that platform was used to hold up an idol. Why are you sitting on it? You're benefiting from it. You're benefiting from an accessory to idolatry. But it's damaged. So he's probably going to say, it's damaged. They abandoned it. They removed it from the realm of idolatry. Now it's permitted. I can sit on it. Is that what's going on? Let's see. When Ula came from Eretz Yisrael to Babel, he sat on a damaged platform of idol worship. Rabbi Yehuda said to Ula, but don't Rav and Shmuel both say a platform that was damaged remains prohibited? And even according to the one who says that idol worshippers do not worship fragments of idols, that statement applies only to an object of idol worship, as it is a degrading matter to a person to worship fragments. But in this case, with regard to the platform, it does not matter to him if it is damaged, as it is still fit for use. Ula said to Rabbi Yehuda, who shall give us of the dust of the graves covering Rav and Shmuel? We would fill our eyes with that dust, as they are great and holy men. Nevertheless, with regard to the law in this case, don't Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish both say a platform that was damaged is permitted? Sounds like Rav and Shmuel say even this damaged platform is prohibited. Where are Rav and Shmuel? In Bavel. Where are Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish? In Eretz Yisrael. Who's bringing the teachings from one place to another? Ula, right? Ula is the great traveler who is going back and forth between Eretz Yisrael and Bavel and sort of sharing with the sages in each location what the sages in the other locale are saying. He's not just a messenger. He's a great sage himself who is able to say, well, this is what they hold, and this is what they hold, and what are we going to do with it? But don't Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish and Eretz Yisrael both say a platform that was damaged is permitted. And even according to the one who says that idol worshippers worship fragments of idols, that statement applies only to an object of idol worship, due to the fact that since he already worshipped it, it is now a degrading matter to him to revoke its status. But in the case of these platforms, idol worshippers take this platform and throw it away and bring another platform that is not defective to replace it. So they are revoking the status of the accessory of the idol, not because they stop worshiping the idol or they want to revoke the status of the idol. On the contrary, they want the best pedestal or platform for the idol. So once it's damaged, they throw it away and bring a new one. So the thrown away one is an accessory to idolatry. It had its status of an accessory to idolatry removed by the idolater, according to Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, and that's why Ula feels comfortable sitting on it. But in the case, yeah, exactly. So it is taught in a baraisa in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish over in Eretz Yisrael. A platform that was damaged is permitted. Conversely, an altar of idolatry that was damaged remains prohibited until most of it is destroyed. Not a pedestal or platform that holds up the idol, but an altar on which the idolaters bring offerings to the idol. That's a high-end accessory to the idol, let's say. So conversely, an altar of idolatry that was damaged remains prohibited until most of it is destroyed. So what is considered a platform and what is considered an altar? Rabbi Yaakov Bar Idi says that Rabbi Yochanan says a platform consists of one stone, an altar consists of many stones. And finally, at the top of page 54a, Chizkiah said, what is the verse from which this law is derived? It is derived from the verse, by this shall the iniquity of Jacob be expiated, when he makes all the stones of the altar as limestones that are beaten into pieces, so that the Asherim and the sun images shall rise no more. This indicates that if the description as limestones that are beaten into pieces is fulfilled, then the statement, the sun images shall rise no more, also applies and their status is revoked. But if it is not fulfilled, then they shall rise, meaning their status is not revoked. Right? So if it's an altar, even if it's damaged, it's still considered an altar and it's prohibited for benefit to a Jew. But if it's mostly destroyed, then it's considered no longer an altar of idolatry, and that the idolaters abandoned it, they removed it from the realm of idolatry, and we could use those stones, to build a well or something. Okay, that's what I've got for us today. Now I'm going to scan for some comments. Seems like a big conversation going on. Many months ago we covered that, says Joe, many months ago we covered that if something is found by a Jew, they are obligated to attempt to return it. A member of the class asked, what about a prayer beads belonging to a Gentile that were found in the middle of the road? No answer was given at the time, most likely because it was a late post. Could a Jew move prayer beads as such to the side of the road to protect the community from inadvertent contact with it? I'm thinking of him picking it up with a stick while pinching his nose to let others know that he isn't worshiping it and is repugnant to him. He could deposit on the side of the road, hopefully not on the property of a Jew. I would think that that would not put it on a fence post or hang it from a branch, lest others think that he was elevating its status. You're really showing, Joe, that you understand the various elements of these halachas as you ask your question. Really great question. So the question is, let's take the simplest case, right? We want to return lost objects. But what if it's an idol, right? We need to distance ourselves from idolatry, even though we know that that idol, let's say, is emotionally meaningful to the idolater. We're not going to get involved in that. On the other hand, what if this would cause danger to the Jewish people? That, it was seen that he, didn't help return the idol to the idolater. So then maybe, as a matter of getting along, in a majority idolater culture, where the Jews are temporarily living, where they might be in danger if the Jew doesn't do something to help restore it. But he has to do it in such a way with the shinui, right? Like he's picking it up in a way that it's clear he's not trying to acquire it, even accidentally. So he makes that clear in the way that he moves it over to the side. Maybe he moves it to the side, maybe notifies, some local idolater, hey, this was seen, maybe you want to go look into it, that kind of a thing. There's a lot more to it, but this shows great sensitivity in your question. We also had the question yesterday, I think it was Sharon, talking about like if you go to Mexico, you visit as a tourist, some Aztec temple, could you buy a souvenir, like a souvenir image of that Aztec calendar, for example? I don't think you asked that particular example, but I brought it up. And so I did look into it a little bit after class, and I'll tell you, it's not a simple answer. I was not able to get a simple answer to that. It does seem like that calendar was very much, measuring time according to idolatrous, mythology, stories, the worship of the Aztecs, which was clearly idolatrous. They had many gods. And there were images of those gods and stories from the stories of those gods embedded in that calendar. So it's clearly an idolatrous object, the original one. The souvenir copy of it, right, it was never used for idolatry. It wasn't intended to be used for idolatry. It's just a souvenir tchotchke. But I was not able to find an answer where it'd say, well, because it's a souvenir tchotchke, it's permitted. It's definitely a representation of idolatry. So I don't have a clear answer on that. If somebody gets one, an actual ruling from a Rav, I'd like to hear it. So in my opinion, I would say the safe answer, no. Don't get it. It represents idolatry. We don't want to have anything to do with it. But I don't have a source and a clear answer on that. Has any archaeological exploration ever uncovered objects of idolatry in the Dead Sea? I think what Sharon is saying is the sea is always retreating. So if 2,000 years ago people were throwing objects of idolatry into the Dead Sea to be forever rid of them, and then those waters receded, perhaps those objects were found, centuries later. And then what would we do with them? I would think they would remain prohibited for the same reason they were tossed in there in the first place. A non-religious museum might disagree and put it on display. But for a Jew, it would remain prohibited, is in my opinion. Lucy, thinking of the complexities for Babylonian Jews to make a living, sell things, etc., when their context perfused with idols and other related equipment. Great point, right? So we have to distance ourselves from idolatry. Okay, but if you're living in a culture that it's not just something they do now and then, right? But like everything is based on their idolatry. Every legal document mentions their idolatry. They're going to have sort of special rulings and dispensations to help them navigate how you avoid ever, committing some act of idolatry. So I would think that they would all have a Rav that they would go to for guidance on these kinds of questions. Because it would not be so simple. I'm sure there's all kinds of situations that we wouldn't even think that they are associating themselves with idolatry, and it could be perceived that way. So we're just doing the best we can with our modern intellect and our limited amount of time that we're spending on any particular page here in Tractate Avoda Zara. That's what I've got for us today, and with God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow after Shabbos ends at the regular time, maybe 9:30-ish p.m. All the best. Good Shabbos.